When I was a kid, adults told me a story about work. They said, if you study hard, if you get a good job, if you stay loyal and you work hard, you'll be safe. You'll be respected. You'll be free. And I remember thinking that all of this sounded very comforting. It gave structure to a world that felt overwhelming. But here's the thing, that story was just a lie. Maybe the biggest lie ever told about work. And it actually took me decades and a lot of pain to finally see it. I believed in it at first. I forced myself to believe it because, well, let's face it, what was the alternative? That life is just chaos, that none of us are safe. But the longer I worked, the clearer it became. The promise of work, it wasn't real. It was a fairy tale that kept us obedient. So, what exactly is the biggest lie about work? It's this: if you work hard, the system will reward you. That's the hook. That's the line that parents tell their kids, that teachers drill into students, and managers whisper to keep you compliant. That's the lie that keeps billions of people grinding their entire lives. But reality, it keeps proving the opposite. So, for example, take the company Intel. In 2025, this year, Intel announced that it would lay off 24,000 employees. That's about 15% of its entire workforce. Not because it was collapsing or not because it had no more money left, but because it was restructuring and, canceling massive projects in Europe. Intel still reported billions in revenue, yet tens of thousands of workers, some with decades of loyalty, were suddenly disposable. This is the truth about jobs. Security was never the deal, and I've seen this up close. I never forget the days when I've seen huge layoffs at works at some of my old jobs. People just sat frozen at their desks, staring at the email that told them that their time was up. A few actually cried, and others just walked straight out without saying a word. And then HR would roll out a cake, an actual cake, to thank the people who were leaving. It was a very hollow gesture, sweet frosting on bitter reality. We were literally celebrating the end of people's livelihoods. And this was the day when I stopped believing the story. And I also remember this one time when I worked as a receptionist. I used to watch this coworker of mine who had been there for something like 20 years. 20 years of showing up on time, never missing a shift, always doing what was asked. He should have been respected. Instead, he was invisible. And when he was passed over for promotion, yet again, he sort of shrugged and laughed bitterly, like he already knew the game was rigged. And later, when I was working in this IT department, I met a colleague who had been at the company for more than a decade. A brilliant guy, knew the systems inside and out. But every time he applied for advancement, someone else was chosen. Usually someone younger, shinier, better at schmoozing with the management. He confided in me this one day that I'm too old to start over. I'm too tired to keep pretending. So I'm just going to stay here until they fire me. And that's sort of when I realized that the system, it doesn't actually reward loyalty. It feeds on it. And the story we're told is seductive. It says that if you sacrifice your weekends, if you stay late, if you push yourself harder, someone will notice. Someone will reward you. But that day rarely comes. And the moment profits dip, or strategies change, or a new executive decides to cut costs, suddenly you're not family, you're not valued, you're just a line item, a number to be deleted. And if you think about it, promotions, they don't go to the hardest workers. They go to the most political, the most visible, the ones who know how to play the game. And I've seen brilliant colleagues burn themselves out chasing the promise, while some less competent but better connected moved up instead. You see, the hours you grind, they don't buy security. They buy the company a bigger margin. They buy the CEO another bonus. They buy the shareholders new yachts. But when they're done with you, they will let you go with a pat on the back and maybe, if you're lucky, a slice of the cake. You know, the worst part of all of this is that it isn't new. Wage slavery has been a part of human history for a really long time. Now, if you think about the pyramids, keep mentioning those damn pyramids, generations of workers spent their lives hauling stone, breaking their bodies to build these monuments for someone else's glory. And we still admire those monuments today, but we rarely think of the millions of lives that were swallowed up to create them. And we're still doing the same thing now. Only today, the pyramids aren't made of stone. They're made of corporate profits, brand empires, stockholder dividends. The faces of the workers change, but the purpose stays the same. Sacrifice your time and your body to build something you will never own. In the Middle Ages, peasants actually worked less than we do today. Now, it sounds impossible, but it's true. Peasants actually did work less than us today. Sure, life was hard, food was scarce, and winters were brutal, but the rhythm of work was seasonal. It wasn't endless. Crops needed planting, then came long pauses. Harvest brought a rush, then came rest. By some estimates, peasants had 80 to 100 days off every year. That's more vacation than most of us could ever dreamed of. Now, Sundays were sacred. Festivals stretched out for days. Life wasn't easy, but it wasn't a constant grind. Now, if you compare that to us today, 5 days a week, 50 weeks a year for 40 years. And if you're lucky, maybe 2 weeks of vacation. The medieval peasant, dirt on his hands, sunburn on his face, might have lived with less comfort, but in terms of time, that man was richer. And then came the Industrial Revolution, which I've made a lot of videos about. Work shifted from land to factory, from rhythm to schedule, from seasons to shifts. And suddenly, time itself was owned. Bells, clocks, whistles. Your body wasn't enough. They wanted your hours, your attention, your obedience. This was the birth of modern wage slavery. Productivity became the measure of human worth. And the 8-hour day, we treated like some sort of sacred balance. But like I've said so many times in my videos, it wasn't designed for fairness. Henry Ford didn't introduce it out of kindness. He introduced it because research showed that productivity dropped after 8 hours. That's it. If humans were most efficient at 12 hours, we would be working 12 today. The system was never about our well-being. It was about efficiency, about output, about profit. World War II and the years that followed offered a different kind of illusion. Oh, and by the way, Henry Ford, he was actually a Nazi fan, just so you know. So it's kind of weird that we still listen to his instructions about how long a work week should be. Anyway, I get off track here. The post-war boom promised something new. Stable jobs, pensions, a single income that could support a family, even a mortgage in the suburbs. This was the era of the so-called American dream. People believed in it because, for a while, it seemed to work.